Thank you, everyone. It's been a great conference until now, and I think you are the ones who are a big part of this. So, and I have to say that I slept about 5 hours last night. So if I fall asleep on the stage, you'll understand me. Right.
We'll applaud.
Okay. Yeah, just applaud so that I can wake up. Thank you. Right. So I would argue now that this whole conference has been about feedback. Because we have discussed things like BDD that minimizes the feedback loop for understanding things. And we've discussed about building specifications and about retrospectives. And all these things are somehow related to feedback. And this is what I'd like to talk about today, because in my work as an agile and technical coach, I've noticed that we don't pay enough attention to feedback, at least in the teams that I've seen until now. So why do I say that this is a lost art? First, because we have a history of forgetting about feedback in software development. And let me give you an example. You've probably seen this diagram before. This was on the first page of Winston Royce's paper discussing waterfall. Only nobody read the third page, where he was saying that the implementation described above is risky and invites failure. And then the rest of the paper is about how to fix this implementation by introducing feedback loops. Yeah. And somehow, the people who took this model and started using it forgot about the rest. They just took the first page. The second one, the second example is unit testing. So I'm teaching a course in unit testing these days, which is pretty amazing because people were talking about unit testing in 1985. And people like Jerry Weinberg, who's a well-known Agile coach, they used to write unit tests on punch cards, which makes complete sense because when you had to write code on punch cards, it took a very long time to be able to actually run it and see that you have a problem. So what they did was to write unit tests to figure out what the problems are when they had the time to actually go to the machine, to the mainframe, and run these programs. And maybe the most amazing of one that I found is the Agile Manifesto. I actually searched in Agile Manifesto and in principles for the word feedback. There's nowhere. And of course, I will not say that Agile doesn't talk about feedback. They talk a lot about early and continuous delivery, delivering software frequently, and so on. It's behind all these statements is the discussion of feedback. Only nobody wrote it down. And I've had this conversation with Mike Beadle, who actually told me that behind the manifesto there were other things, like software is knowledge. They didn't write this down either. So we have a history of losing feedback. But I hope that now we are finally getting on the way of finding it again, which is the lean startup way. If you read the book, it's, let's say, a very extreme lean method applied to business. How to create a business, how to create a startup. And the basic idea is you start by validating assumptions. And any business assumption that you make, you validate it at most in 2 weeks. So feedback is really at the core of this method. And I invite you to read Eric Ries's books because they are very interesting. So why do I say it's hard? Well, because it's not a science. I haven't seen anybody describing in detail how you can give and provide feedback, even get feedback. But of course, some science is involved, psychology, statistics, and so on. Anyway, what I'm trying to tell you today is that software development is on a quest for high quality and faster feedback. This is much more important today than it was maybe 10 years ago, because we are moving very, very fast. And the reason we are doing that is, I don't know, maybe you can tell me. Why do we want feedback? Sorry? To make a better product. Anybody else?
Head in the right direction.
Head in the right direction. Sorry?
Validate assumptions.
Validate assumptions. So basically I collected a few things, which are 3 pieces of information, 3 answers to this question. One is to validate decisions, another one is to improve the process of working, and the third one is to improve teamwork. And we'll move through these a little bit in more detail. So I find this slide very nice, so I just edited it because I like the pictures. I think that it's useful, feedback is useful for people to learn and for process to include a continuous improvement cycle. So I'll just step back a little bit and ask what feedback is. Of course, we all know it's a system, it creates an output, that output is fed back into the system. But I think the most important thing here is the engineering type of feedback. So in engineering, you cannot say that you have feedback in the system unless you act on it. So if only you give feedback to somebody, but they don't change, that's not feedback. This is the engineering definition of it. And this is my favorite one. Because it doesn't matter how much feedback or how good the feedback is, unless you actually do something about it. And I'll just move a little bit through the ideas of feedback in Scrum. I won't go in detail, you know, retrospectives, you know, daily Scrum meetings, and you know, this is actually a great board. I love it a lot. But the most important part is how we got here. The way we got here was we had maybe 1 year release cycles, and then we realized that we are shipping the wrong thing. So we decided to make shorter release cycles and shorter and shorter and so on. So we went from a model that was very long to the model that we have now with Scrum, 2-week sprints, something like that. We realized that maybe we are making some mistakes in the process of developing software, and then we try to find them as early as possible, and that's why we introduce retrospectives. So you see, software development, as I was saying you, is on a quest to reduce the cycles. This is what Scrum has been doing. If we take coding stuff, then we have a few techniques for feedback. Let's take, for example, code, right? You write a line of code, and that's bad quality, and you commit it. And in the old ways, it used to be that you are alone in your cubicle, and you just push that line of code, and you don't know what happens with it. But then we realized that this introduces problems in the system. So we came up with this idea of doing code reviews. Yeah, that's the best measure of code reviews. WTF per minute. Yeah, so it's a very good way of measuring the quality of the code. So And then we realized that we can do code reviews differently, and that's how we got to pair programming. Maybe you do code review once a week, but with pair programming you do code review every few seconds. That's another example of shortening the feedback time for such a process. The continuous build system, that's another example. If you build only when you have the release date, then probably you are in big trouble. If you build every day, then you will know when somebody breaks the build. If you build on every commit, then again, it's better. And it's the same with unit tests and test-driven development and so on. So, because I was saying that the quest is for better and higher quality feedback, I will ask you to do a feedback quiz with me. And the quiz is about the following things. I will present a situation and something that some people do in that situation. So it's not about you or about anybody I know. And I will ask you to rate the quantity and the quality of feedback that we receive by that. And you'll see these are all examples that I found in Teams. So these are not things that I invented. For example, a teammate introduces bugs in the application every sprint. Right? And you can see that. So, you might not care. How would you qualify that as feedback? Sorry? Prisoner? Yeah. No feedback at all, right? Tell him he should stop programming. How is this?
Yeah.
Worse.
Semi-useful.
It's actually high quantity but low quality, right? It doesn't help much. Review his code and tell him what problems you find. Do you do that?
But it would only be feedback if he reacted on it.
Yeah.
How can we know that he reacted on it?
Yeah. Ask him how you can help to avoid it. This is one of the things I try to teach teams. Whenever you see a problem, go to the person who you think creates the problem and try to discuss with them and see how can I help you avoid this problem. Let's see another one. Pair with him. Identify what happens and try to help him learn better. So actually these last two are pretty good, and it depends on the type of person you deal with, but it's better feedback, it's better quality. Let's go to another one. I've seen this live too. So you have a project and it has automated tests, but you don't run them, it's integration department's business. No feedback at all. 50 tests fail from time to time. Shit happens. You've never seen this, right?
There's a random somewhere in the test.
Yeah, maybe. So this is really bad feedback. It's actually worse than not having any tests. Well, for 50, okay. If it's a random sample of the 50 tests, then we are in a big trouble. When making a change, 20 tests fail.
No.
That's good enough for you? Or?
Too much feedback.
Too much? Yeah. And most two tests fail in case of a mistake. You can actually achieve that if you follow a few principles in unit testing. Let's go on a different level. All tests run nightly. That's Low quantity is from time to time. And actually the best way is to separate the fast tests and to run them each time the code changes. That's higher quantity of feedback. And if you only have 2 tests that fail in case of a mistake, you already have a very good feedback loop. Okay. This one I'm sure you've never seen. A teammate talks at every daily scrum for 10 minutes and delays the meeting. You are the scrum master and you think at something different while he speaks. Or maybe you find ways to leave earlier. You are a busy scrum master doing 3 teams, so you tell him to stop talking because he's annoying. And you know, developers have a strange way of being very aggressive in their communication. So that's one of the things that most of us, including me, would say on a first reaction, but I try to control it. Talk to him in private and tell him he should stop. Maybe. Yeah. Of course, it matters how you tell him. Or the best one that I've seen is do a retrospective at the end of the meeting and actually ask everyone in the meeting, how was this meeting? What can we do to improve it the next time? Yeah.
2 hours.
Then it takes 2 hours, right? Okay. Number 4. You find a piece of complicated code at the end of the sprint while modifying other parts of the application. You ignore it because maybe you won't have to change it. That's the usual one, right? Okay, you write the issue down and then forget about it. You discuss it in the team and add it to the backlog. Better. That would be a good thing to do, and this relates to continuous improvement. You take 15 minutes to refactor it and then move on. Yeah? How many of you do that actually? Okay, excellent. So you see, that's the best feedback you can, the best feedback loop you can introduce in your system. Of course, if you understand the code to a certain degree of confidence, because there may be hidden dependencies there. Okay, one that I think you would love. You are a manager of a Scrum team and have to evaluate the people. You don't evaluate them, whoever asks for a raise might get it.
That's all good.
I haven't actually seen this in practice, but I can imagine. You do a yearly evaluation according to company policies. Right? I guess that's what happens most of the times. Maybe not yearly, maybe twice a year. You go at the team meetings to evaluate the people. That's kind of dangerous,
Manager.
but okay. Maybe they won't say everything after that. You do a 360-degree evaluation every 2 months. It could be too much, depends on the people, but still more feedback. You have weekly one-on-one meetings, monthly 360s, and you attend the meetings from time to time. Of course, you are an Agile manager.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Who is the manager of a Scrum team? What? Who's that?
Okay. Well, it depends on the organization, actually. In a small organization, you still have a manager, right? Somebody who pays the salaries, somebody who hires, somebody who fires. And maybe they delegate this to you. So there are some organizations in which they delegate raises or hiring and firing to the team. But it's still their job. So, right. But why aren't we doing these things? We aren't doing them because actually feedback is very hard. It's hard to get feedback. One of the things that I love doing is to do things like coding dojos, where we bring a group of developers together and they write code on a projector like this, and everybody can see it. And at first it's very hard for developers to get over this idea that somebody else sees their code. But after a while, due to the feedback cycle, they learn a lot. But it's really hard. So I'd like to leave you in the end of this talk with a few tools. Tools for doing the things we said: continuous improvement, better teamwork. And there are actually three, and they all relate to the things that we discussed until now. First, if you find a place where you don't have a feedback cycle, try to introduce one. If you can, try to get more feedback, and if you can, try to get more quality feedback. If you at least think of that, then you might come up with good solutions to it. So here's a time for reflection for you. I would like to ask you to think a minute and try to figure out where you miss a feedback loop, or where you could add some more feedback. You don't have to share it, but just think about it for a minute. So there's probably less than a minute. I trust you had some time to do it. And I will end with a few case studies in feedback, and I was involved in these situations, so I can talk from my own experience. I was part of a startup company that was doing an e-health product, and we realized early, I was involved early in the project, and we realized very early that because it's a startup, we need to validate a lot of things that we do. And we were fortunate enough to find a group of users who were interested about this project and wanted to see it growing. So what we did, we started from the beginning with the idea we have to deploy this every 2 or 3 days. We have to get as much feedback as we can. But this was just one feedback cycle that we got. The second feedback cycle was one of the first features we created for that product was a feedback form built into the product. It was a desktop application, but wherever you were in the screens of the application, it was very easy for you to write down feedback and submit it. And we noticed that our discussions in the development team moved from things like we have these architectural ideas or so on, which are valuable, towards things like what would this user like to have in the application? Is this useful enough or not? Another case study, as I said, I'm doing a unit testing class, and I started it early. I actually did the first class in Timisoara about a few years ago. And I've noticed that people were asking kind of the same questions during the class. And we were having kind of the same conversations. So in time I tried to integrate in the course all these things that we were discussing about. And now, after a few years of doing it, what happened is that during the class I get fewer clarification questions. So we discuss things like, I don't know, what's next for unit testing, or things that are roughly in the area of unit testing. But there are almost no more questions about the topics themselves. They are all very well covered by the class. And the feedback got higher, the grades that I get. So this was one example where I was very happy that I could introduce the feedback in my class, and it actually made my job easier and the attendees learning better. Now, this is the company that I work for, and it's a very interesting case study because we are a distributed team. Basically, we have Flavius here in Timisoara, and everybody's traveling wherever we are needed. It's a training company. We have very different backgrounds. We come from technical and very non-technical sides of business and jobs. And what we do is we started doing a 6 months team retreat where we actually plan the next projects, the next improvement projects for the company. And we work on them on 2-week sprints. And everything that we do is visible. So it's basically kind of like Scrum, only you cannot demo always because the other people won't understand everything that you do. But it's still a very good feedback cycle that we have built into the company. And I think until now everybody's happy with it. So. Right. And the last one is my secret process for creating presentations, which has gotten better, but I need to make it even better. So in the beginning, when I was doing presentations, I started by doing slides and then practicing. I wasn't really thinking here. So I tried to do something else. I did the slides, then talked on slides, recorded myself, listened to myself, and then practiced again. This was a little bit better, but it was very long. So then I realized that whenever I listen to myself, that's when I get the most feedback. So I said, how about listening to myself early on? What would I need for myself to listen from this presentation? What do I need before? So the first thing I do is actually a brainstorming, where I map all my ideas, select the main line at the top, and then start talking. I record myself, and based on this recording, I then create the slides. And what happened is that I'm not sure about the quality. This is for you to judge, right? But what I noticed is that before it took me 3 days to make a presentation, and now I can do one in 4 hours. And I think it's roughly the same quality. I still have to work on the quality itself, but that's another topic. So, I'd like to close with a few main ideas. I think software development is on a quest for more and higher quality feedback. The second very important point is that it's feedback only if you do something about it. So at least don't kid yourself saying that you have a lot of feedback built in unless you do something. If you need some tools, try to figure out where you can introduce a feedback cycle, how you can make it faster, how you can make it better. And feedback is hard. So I think that we are rediscovering now that feedback is at the core of software development. And we should practice it more. And because we are in a community, and I started by talking about the Agile Works community and what it means, and you've all been here today sharing, learning, having conversations with other people. There's something I'd like you to do. Now is the time to practice some feedback. You have in your notebooks one form that looks like that, one or two forms. So I will ask you to fill it in. It's a thank you card where you thank somebody for something. And you can give it away at the networking drink afterwards. Maybe, I don't know, you loved Thomas' talk about BDD, so you could thank him about this and encourage him to do some more. Or maybe you just want to thank yourself for attending the conference. I don't know. But try to do this, and I can take some questions afterwards.